For decades, we've all heard about the war on drugs. We've seen the headlines, the nightly news reports, the politicians making speeches. But what if I told you there's another story? A hidden history running just beneath the surface. It's a story of compromise, of complicity, and of secret operations where the good guys and the bad guys, well, the line between them got incredibly blurry. Today, we're pulling back that curtain.
And look, this isn't some old story from a history book. This is happening right now. Just look at the headlines coming out today. From Turkey all the way to the Philippines, you see the exact same pattern. The global drug trade is tangled up with governments and state power. This isn't just about street corners anymore. This is about corruption at the very highest levels. And we're not talking about low-level guys here. The accusations go right to the top. I mean, think about it. The people in charge of a nation's economy are at the same time being accused of running drug empires. It's a shocking pattern, and it just repeats itself all over the world.
And it gets to a point where the corruption runs so deep, we actually have a term for it, the narco state. That's when the very pillars of a country, its police, its courts, its politicians, are basically captured by the insane profits and power of the drug trade.
And hey, don't think for a second this is just a problem over there. Even in Mexico, one of America's most important allies, you've got these incredibly serious allegations of cartel money and influence reaching the president's inner circle. All of this, it just begs the question.
So, you gotta ask, right? How in the world did we get here? To really understand the mess we're in today, we have to rewind the clock. We've got to go back to the Cold War, a time when American foreign policy had one single-minded goal: stop communism at all costs. And as we're about to see, at all costs often meant turning a blind eye to some very shady business.
Okay, so let's start with our man in Panama. This is a perfect example of the double game I'm talking about. His name was General Manuel Noriega. For years, he was one of the most important U.S. assets in Central America. The problem? He was also one of the region's biggest drug traffickers.
I mean, just look at this. It's wild. Noriega was living this complete double life. On one hand, he was on the CIA payroll, trained in the U.S., feeding intel back to Washington. On the other hand, he was a full-blown cocaine kingpin. He ran protection rackets for the Colombian cartels, charged them $100,000 for every drug flight that passed through his airspace, and basically turned Panama into a giant laundromat for dirty money.
And what's crazy is how long this went on. U.S. intelligence knew he was dirty for decades, but during the Cold War he was just too useful. He controlled the Panama Canal, he was a key ally against communism, so his side hustle was overlooked. It was only after the Cold War started winding down that his usefulness ran out. And then, almost overnight, he became the new poster child for the war on drugs.
But Noriega, believe it or not, was just one piece of this puzzle. Our next story is, frankly, even more shocking. It draws a direct line from a secret CIA war in Central America right to the crack cocaine epidemic that absolutely devastated American cities.
So, let me break down how this pipeline worked. Back in the 80s, Congress told the CIA, no more money for your secret army, the Contras, who were fighting the socialists in Nicaragua. So the CIA's allies got creative. Some of them teamed up with drug traffickers to raise cash, and they started pumping huge amounts of cocaine into the U.S. A lot of that coke ended up with dealers like LA's Freeway Rick Ross, and that flood, that massive influx of cheap, pure cocaine, well, that's what helped fuel the rise of crack.
And let's be crystal clear about this. This is not some fringe conspiracy theory. This comes from the CIA's own internal investigation. In 1998, their Inspector General released a report, and it admitted that, yeah, the agency knew its Contra allies were dealing drugs. It admitted they didn't stop them. And in some cases, it admitted they actively stepped in to protect these traffickers from getting busted by other cops.
So when you look at Noriega and you look at the Contras, you start to see they aren't just one-offs. They're part of a pattern. A very clear pattern where the official war on drugs took a back seat, time and time again, to secret geopolitical goals. This really just lays it all out, doesn't it? In Panama, the goal was keeping a strategic ally, so Noriega's drug empire got a pass. In Nicaragua, the goal was toppling a socialist government, so the cocaine trafficking that paid for the war was protected. Again and again, foreign policy came first, and folks back home in American communities paid a heavy price.
Okay, so that brings us back to today. Because that pattern, that playbook of using state power to protect criminals, it didn't just end with the Cold War. Oh no, it went global. And it's at the very heart of the worldwide drug crisis we're seeing right now.
I mean, just take a look around the world. In Mexico, the guy who was supposed to be the nation's top cop was convicted of taking millions in bribes from the cartels he was supposed to be fighting.
In the Balkans and Turkey, corrupt officials grease the wheels for drugs pouring into Europe. Over in the Middle East, you've got state-backed groups running an industrial-scale trade in speed. And in Asia, Myanmar's military government is making a fortune off of opium and meth. The names and places change, but the model is exactly the same. The government provides the cover, and the criminals get rich.
Okay, so after all that, this global web of corruption, the story takes one last really surprising twist that brings us right back home to the U.S. border. And it's a twist that completely flips one of the most common stories we hear about the drug war.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. We hear this constant story about drugs coming across the border, right? And we're usually shown images of migrants crossing through the desert. But what does the government's own data show? A totally different story. At the official border crossings, the legal checkpoints, somewhere between 81 and 92% of the fentanyl they seize is being smuggled by U.S. citizens. And you have to ask why. It's simple, really. They get less scrutiny. The cartels figured out a long time ago that Americans are their best smugglers.
So that's where we land. We've seen how Cold War games protected traffickers, we've seen the absolute devastation it caused back home, and now we see a modern crisis where the real smugglers might not be who we're told they are. Which leaves us with one massive final question. After all of this, after decades of compromise and blowback and unintended consequences, what would a real war on drugs even look like?